Hello, this is Tom Turner with a second podcast video about balconies. It's a chat with Robert Holden. We're both landscape architects and we met on the roof terrace of the Queen Elizabeth Hall in central London. The word balcony came into English in the 17th century from Italian and meant a structure projecting from a building. So the QE terrace isn't actually a balcony, but it does have a good cafe. We'd both seen the images you'll see in the video, grouped much as they are now. The first speaker is me. Do you have a comment on traditional balconies in London? I mean, 19th century and before.
In the 19th century, there were some fantastic balconies in London.
Well, wouldn't you agree that they were much more elegant, much more beautiful than current balconies?
Yes, I agree. I mean, there's so many Juliet balconies, which are just railings and spoiled.
I thought for years that the Juliet balcony was an idiotic idea. But if you think of it as floor-to-ceiling glazing that can be opened so that you get an open window onto the outdoor world to be enjoyed from inside, that's not a bad thing in itself, although it obviously doesn't have the function of a proper balcony. Of the photographs that I took of balconies, they were mostly beside the Thames and on buildings from the last 10, 20, 30 years. And I thought that they proved the rightness of Alexander's pattern language. They were too small, too public, and scary. Actually scary. And I think that architects have got into the habit of treating them in the way that car designers treated chromium strips when we first had cars. They just think of it as an ornament which actually decreased the function of the vehicle because they drilled holes through the bodywork and then they had a bimetal effect between the two metals, and so that rust used to spread from the fixings of the chromium and the chromium flaked off, and it was just an ornament which was a damn nuisance for the car owner. And I think that's pretty well what's happened to balconies.
They tend to be an addition, perhaps prettifying a building. The typical Juliet balcony seems to be an opportunity that isn't taken advantage of, just as people's small front gardens are often neglected.
A balcony is not one thing. There's a case for a Juliet balcony, there's a case for a planted balcony, there's a place for a dining balcony, there's a place for a food-growing balcony. They should be designed just like rooms should be designed. It's not a standard thing. It's a design opportunity rather than a way of decorating a building.
I suppose you could arrange running water to the balcony so that you can water the plants.
I think that for planting it's essential, and I think that's a major flaw with balconies, that they don't have a water supply. If you want to grow plants, you need water, light and soil. And the designers of supposedly decorative balconies do not provide these things. Another thing, what do you think about the dimensions of balconies? Alexander says they need to be about 6 feet deep. Do you think he's right about that?
6 feet is generous, and it would accommodate my 2 or 3 feet of legs projecting.
We've just done a small experiment with a cafe table and 3, but it should be 4 chairs. And you really do need 3 2x2 slabs by 3 2x2 slabs for 4 people to sit round. Yes,
but 2 people could sit round a table in a 4 foot deep balcony.
They could.
Or could sit either side of a table.
They could, but if you do that and you've got one door into the living room, then the living room blocks off access and you can't get to the other seat without the first person standing up and squashing themselves against the wall.
The doors can open inwards.
They can do, but that takes up space in the room that you can't use for furniture.
True.
So next point, enclosure. What do you think about Alexander's idea that a balcony should be set into the building?
In part recessed, that seems a good idea. It provides a feeling of security and enclosure.
And I would go further than that. I've noticed quite a lot of people putting sunshades on their balconies because the weather varies and sometimes you do want a shade for sitting in the sun. So from that point of view, I think enclosure is more than just recess. I think people want a degree of privacy on a balcony.
Agreed.
So really, enclosure and privacy are two sides of the same coin, aren't they? And you want to be able to adjust the conditions according to the weather and the surroundings and the degree of social comfort that you want to have.
Yes, it depends though. I recall walking along the Promenade Plantée in Versailles, and every year when we walked, in October indeed, there was always somebody on a Sunday morning who was naked on his and sunbathing on his balcony.
The next topic on the list is microclimate. Any views?
Well, this is a problem with high rise. It makes for windy external microclimate.
Wind is one problem, but also sun and rain.
Well, problems and opportunities, yes.
A balcony needs to have the means of regulating the microclimate according to the prevailing weather.
It's good to be able to keep the sun out if you is to have a sunshade, a blind.
What about planting on balconies? I mean, I've often thought on housing estates that about half of the people look after their gardens and the others don't. Do you think it might be the case with balconies that half the owners want to look after plants and the other half don't?
I think it's fewer than half.
But don't you think that's because of the difficulty of it? I mean, if you've got a balcony and you go on holiday for 2 weeks, you've got to water the plants or you lose them all, because balconies don't have a water supply and don't have any decent soil containers either.
Depends on the season this year. You could have probably gone away for a couple of weeks in August and it was rainy, so it wouldn't have been a problem. Or you can decide to just lose this year's plants and grow some more.
Other uses for balconies, what is your view on the people who use them to store bicycles or hang up their washing or put cupboards for tins of paint and stuff like that?
Well, washing is a traditional and rather jolly way of using balconies. Storage, yes, if they wish. It can look messy, but why not?
Well, the architects who built the balconies as decorative features on their boring buildings, I bet they don't want to have them used for bicycles or other storage or old furniture. To finish then, international examples of balconies. Have you seen more and better abroad than in Britain?
Ottoman balconies are quite interesting. In Russia, or certainly in Moscow, people intervene a lot and build extensions of their own. I think that also happens in Hong Kong, doesn't it?
Haven't been to Hong Kong, but Italy is notable for its balconies.
Well, we've talked about Romeo and Juliet. They seem very much a Mediterranean thing, and with warming climate, might well have a brilliant future in Britain as well.
You say Romeo and Juliet. I'm an admirer of Indian balconies where there's a long tradition of including them in palaces. And if you look at Mughal and Rajput miniatures, they're using them most definitely for romantic encounters, and many of them go well beyond romance as well. But balconies are just wonderful in India. Paris, New Orleans, there's a French tradition in balconies as well. Well, what I'm arguing for is better balconies. I think that they need to be thoughtfully planned, designed and serviced with water, drainage and soil according to the needs of the residents. And we've seen during 2020 and 2021, when people have been confined at home because of COVID, how much better life is if they've got a balcony than if they're just cooped up for 23 hours a day.
There is one thing that we haven't mentioned, one use of balconies. The Pope regularly uses it, which is for making a speech, political demonstration.
As does our royal family, Robert. Let's be patriotic.
Absolutely.
Well, no speeches, but they appear. And actually, at the beginning of architectural history, in ancient Egypt, in Amarna, they used to have a balcony for the appearance of the king, the pharaoh, the god king. He appeared on a balcony for his people to see him. And
didn't Hitler, certainly Mussolini used balconies, but didn't Hitler use balconies in Vienna at the time of the Anschluss?
I fear so, Robert, and I think we better conclude the conversation at this point. Thank you very much.